This is Delhi. Please stand by for our next program. This is All India Radio. In our national program of talks tonight, we now bring you a panel discussion entitled Of Rage, Death and Apathy, Our Roads. The panelists are Ms. Vimla Mehra, IPS, former Special Commissioner, Delhi Police, Shri Piyush Tiwari, CEO, Save Life Foundation, Shri Amitabh Pandey, intrepid traveller and member, India's largest biking forum, and Vikram Behel, media personality, who initiates and moderates the discussion.
Welcome to the National Programme of Talks. Roads are a necessity of life, and India is expanding its road network at a phenomenal pace. But we also have an alarming rate of road accidents, incidents of road rage, and, unfortunately, even death. We're going to discuss why our roads are so dangerous and what can be done to make them safer. My guests are Mrs. Vimla Mehra, a senior police officer and a former police special commissioner of the Delhi Police, Piyush Tiwari from Save Life Foundation, Amitabh Pandey, who is a traveller and also a member of one of the larger biking forums of India. We have a problem. We have a very vast road network in the country, but our statistics show that there is a very high rate of accidents and even death in the country. Now, we may put them down in broad areas of traffic violations, probably bad roads, and a few other ancillary problems that we have. But let me start by concentrating on the first part, and that is the driver. Traffic violations are of all types. You have speeding, drunken driving, wrong parking, and this leads to some sort of a situation where even a safe driver could land up in an accident. Since you've been the Special Commissioner of Police, Vimla, let me start with you and ask you, what is being done and how can we actually look at this? Because we know there is a problem. It's not a new problem. So what is being done and what more needs to be done on the driver's side of the situation, where we can somehow reduce the chances of accidents?
You see, there are problems of drivers on the road who are drunk. There are problems who are not trained drivers. And sometimes somebody is in a hurry. So these are the issues which could be the cause of accidents. I think if we can address these issues, and of course bad roads, that's another problem. So I think if we are able to take care of giving licenses only to the qualified people and not under the table getting driving licenses. And the other thing is, of course, drunk drivers. So in case we are able to control these two issues, I'm sure we can go a long way in reducing the number of accidents. The other thing is people in a hurry. You wait at home or then you are in a hurry to reach your destination. So that's another problem, which somebody is overtaking and you are also in a hurry, then there is a clash on the road.
Yeah,
so these are the issues. We can take care of these, then I think we can reduce.
Piyush, would you agree with that driver training is very essential? And of course, proper training where they follow the rules and the rules are enforced correctly. But what else do you think needs to be done?
Yeah, so I agree that the filtration process that determines who gets on the roads and who gets to drive have both traditionally been quite fractured. And up until the Motor Vehicle Amendment Act 2019, which is when for the first time licensing and training have been relooked at and have been reformed, majority of people who got licenses prior to that went through the earlier systems, which we know were not very competent. So one is that, of course, most people who are driving on the roads do not have very professional skilled training in driving. And therefore we see a large number of violations. But I think the one thing that I wanted to emphasize is that a vehicle in the hands of an untrained person is a weapon. And that weapon can and does kill people every single day. And it's very, very crucial that when we train people to drive, or when people are driving on their own, they need to be cognizant of the fact, and I'm hopeful through this program as well, that they are actually operating a weapon and that they need to be conscious of the fact that it can hurt others around them.
Well, Piyush, I agree with you. Anything could be a weapon if it's misused.
Absolutely.
But I want to go further and look at how we could somehow come up with solutions that may be put in place that could even further help the current situation. As you rightly said, already things are being done. with the licensing. But on the ground, we have people like Amitabh who actually go biking around the country. So you've seen the roads close and up front. What is your view? What needs to be done? And where is the problem now?
I'm going to present the end user perspective, so to say, since you kindly mentioned that I like biking, and yeah, I have done about 200,000 kilometers on my bike. But then those are different circumstances. I'm usually in an introspective mood. I'm observing everything. I'm never in a hurry, like ma'am says. So it's not a commute sort of a thing for me. It's almost meditative. So I look deeply into the two aspects of road rage. One is what causes it. And obviously the second aspect is what can we do to avoid it. It always boils down to the person behind the wheel. When we are behind the wheel and on our way to the office, let's say in the morning commute hour, there is always a less sense of accountability towards the other drivers on the road, because you're in your seat, you're inside your car. You feel that you can get away with anything. This is like basic human nature. In fact, we see this all the time on social media as well. You're sitting behind your screen. You just let go of your thoughts. You have no control over what you're saying out there on social media. So exactly the same thing happens when you're driving.
And there's a second psychological point,
Yeah.
which I may add, that a lot of people feel that their vehicle is an extension of their own body.
Yes.
So if somebody even touches the vehicle, they get very upset. It's like a violation of space. I understand that, but how do we actually address this issue on a psychological level with drivers? Do you think they need more training, or they need to be desensitized on this issue?
I think it's the second option. People need to self-introspect. There needs to be a lot of public messaging around the fact that there are three things happening here. One is you as a person. There could be other things going on in your life, in your relationships, at your work, which adds to the stress while you're driving. The second thing is the amount of respect we have for other people in general in life. That's something which needs to be looked at. Because the moment you sit inside a car behind your wheel, that level of respect goes down even 10 notches further. So yeah, there is introspection required. There is public messaging required. These are some of the things.
I was once talking to a gentleman who had a lot of international travel under his belt. And Vimla, in fact, you'll find this interesting because he tells me that whenever he travels to a new country, he says, I assess the country by the way the people drive their cars and how clean their public toilets are. So these are the two yardsticks that he uses. We seem to have a problem when it comes to rage on the road. And the police has tried, the law is in place, and yet we hear of incidents taking place pretty often. In your view and experience, what is the problem and how can it be solved?
You are right when we say that while you are on the roads, whether you are sensitive to other people. So that decides how civilized your society is. I totally agree with that. And I think Indian population is way below the average. And I feel whenever you go out, you find people are not sensitive towards you. And naturally, some of the drivers, I would say that most of the drivers are now being tested and they are going through rigorous tests and they have to clear those things. But generally, the public, maybe pedestrians on the roads, and people are running and crossing the roads. Children playing on the roads. You see these things quite often, especially in the localities. And so I think civic sense in the population as such, be it the parents, be it the younger generation, anyone who is driving or who is on the road and who is likely to affect other people's lives, I think it's very important that our school education, our college education and social messaging has to go to each and everyone who is going out of the house, and so that we ensure that they don't harm anybody else who is coming their way.
I think you've made a very interesting point, and I wonder if you agree, Piyush, that education really starts at home and in school at a very young age. Do you think we're training people enough on road sense? Because at the end of the day, everybody uses the road. If you're in an urban environment, even in a rural environment, it's become a part of life. It's a necessity. And the proper usage of the road needs to be taught. I don't think they teach road manners even for a license. So that's the key that I'm looking at. Do you think it needs to be done at a school level? And do you think anything is being done there?
So there are a couple of points here. One is that when I was growing up, there was definitely a lot more programming on how to behave on the roads, on TV, in school, and so on and so forth. Of course, now a lot of that has changed. At that time, we had just one TV channel, Doordarshan, and you had a lot of public service messaging coming through that. And I still remember advertisements around helmet wearing, around, how to cross the roads and all of that. And I remember learning that in school as well. Now, of course, it's not being taught in most places. What we need at the school level, road safety clubs, even if it's a smaller setting, some level of student-teacher collaborative that can be put together. The second issue, though, and I'm saying that because I think behavior change takes generations to come. It's not going to happen over time. What can happen? It's not going to happen immediately. What can be done sooner is to reduce conflict on the road. Now, we use the word conflict when we say that there are different kinds of road users that are trying to fight for the same space. For example, the leftmost lane on our roads is shared by the bus, but also the cyclist. So you have the biggest, motorized vehicle fighting for the same space with the most vulnerable road user. That conflict creates frustration. That conflict creates injuries, deaths. And there are existing engineering ways, there are ways of segregating that traffic, of segregating those road users. In North India, we see every year there is a Kavar Yatra that happens. During that period of time, they create segregated lanes for pedestrian walkers, right? People who are actually, carrying these things. If you can create it for them within the existing infrastructure, then you can make such measures for normal road users as well. The point is that the more we reduce the conflict, the lesser we will see these situations of people, getting into each other's hair and having a case of road rage. And roads in general, I mean, one part we spoke about was behavior, and I'm sure you'll agree, is that roads in general require a tremendous amount of work. Oftentimes in crash investigation, the driver is the one who's squarely blamed because law enforcement has to build a case. That's how our law is structured. But if you forensically or scientifically investigate a crash, you will see that there is so much off with our roads that in many cases they are causing crashes as opposed to just the driver error. So I think it's a combination of various issues that come together that leads to such a sort of epidemic on our roads where 420 people are dying every day, which is the capacity of a Boeing 747-400 aircraft, which is a fully loaded jet is crashing every day in our country. But unfortunately, the people who are being killed, 70% of them come from parts of our society that can never afford to fly in a plane. So they are extremely poor and vulnerable, economically weaker sections of our society. And I think it is a moral responsibility more than anything else to do things in our engineering design, in our vehicular design to keep them safe. Because we are in most cases relatively safer environment than those who are victims of this big issue.
You make a good point there about, apart from the driver, the second area that we need to look at is the environment and the road. I think you have touched upon one aspect of it, which has been improved recently. So we are seeing a number of changes that have taken place. For example, the old technology of road construction has been now re-looked at. You're looking more at concrete roads, which have less chance of getting a pothole, but again, are very expensive. So on the higher speed roads, I believe there have been moves to try and bring in concrete. But I think that's not the only thing. I think, Amitabh, you would probably be in a better position to tell us what's really happening on the road, so to speak, when it comes to potholes and road signs, because signage is very, very important. You must have signage in place for drivers to get warned as to what is coming up ahead. And as speeds are getting faster, the reaction time is reducing. So therefore, good road signs placed well in advance, lit up well, are now essential. How do you see it, Amitabh?
Well, I'll pick on one thing which you mentioned. Speeds are increasing. So what's really happening, especially in the larger metros, is that more and more expressways are being introduced together with what is traditionally called a dual carriageway or a single carriageway. So now there's obviously a need for creating acceleration zones and de-acceleration zones when you move from one to the other. And also the driving rules change. As Piyush mentioned, that we do not have lane discipline. So lane discipline plays a very critical role when you're on a high-speed expressway. So in fact, ironically, in India, life in the fast lane makes no sense at all, because you will find the slowest moving vehicle in the fastest lane. That's the irony. The other thing is, since my driving education is mostly from abroad, I've lived abroad for like 15 years. So we could take a leaf from their book about the driving license regime. India is a vibrant democracy, but the driving license is actually a privilege and not a right. That is one thing which needs to be ingrained into Indians as well, that they cannot drive willy-nilly the way they please in whatever manner they choose fit. There has to be a sense of discipline, which can only be enforced through a better driver education system, to make them differentiate between expressways and dual carriageways, and also to drive the fact that a driving license is a privilege at the end
Agreed,
of the day.
but at the same time, you must have seen that now the fines have gone up. The enforcement is a lot more. In fact, some people probably complain that the first offense can be too harsh. I don't know what your view is, but some people do say that even as a first offense, they get charged with 3-month suspension of license for some offenses. So is it that we are not being able to uniformly enforce these rules, or is it that there's still scope for making them harsher? What do you think, Vimla?
I think fines have been quite heavy in the recent times. They have been increased.
But is it sufficient in your view?
I think for the time being, let people get used to it. And I think we are using our technology in a big way. Earlier, people felt that they could violate the rules and get away. But now, wherever technology has been used, particularly in Delhi and I think in some urban areas and big centers and cities, I think technology has been made use of, and people are being fined without escaping the observations of the law enforcement agencies. So I think it is a good way. And
but do you think some of these first offences are being dealt with harshly?
I think cancelling or suspending the license for 3 months, I think it would be good to give a warning, at least 1 or 2, maybe second or third. And if it is not a very serious offence, I think the people need to be made aware of what they are going to get. So I think second or third attempt should be suspension, and first it should be a good steep fine.
What about when it comes to road signs? Because that also does come under the purview of the police to some extent. A lot of signs are not correctly placed, or they're placed too far, or at times are not well lit. So how can we solve this problem?
I think lighting is another serious problem, and that needs to be given attention. And of course, once the roads are well lighted, so it would be easy for any driver, any person to walk, and even for people who are crossing the roads. And I think signages, of course, wherever police is alert, signages are good. So we need to invest in professional traffic management, and that should get our attention. And I'm sure 10 to 20% of the accidents on the roads can be if the signages are good enough, and for everybody to use and see, and they are visible so that people can follow them. So signages, of course, are still a big problem. We need to improve.
Piyush, if I may just step to the other area, that when there has been an accident and there is a situation which is a sad one, where somebody may be injured, the Good Samaritan is usually there just as an ordinary citizen who's a bystander who could step in and help. You had some experience and view on this. What is your view? What should a Good Samaritan do? And what is he likely to face if he does get involved?
Sure. So up until 2016, we had a situation where bystanders and passers-by were hesitant to help road crash victims, not because of apathy, but because of very profound sense of fear of getting involved in a legal hassle, being intimidated, being detained by hospitals, forced to make payments, and so on and so forth. Multiple appearances in court and all of that. In 2016, the Supreme Court of India, using its powers, instituted India's first Good Samaritan law that effectively insulates people like you and I from any kind of legal and procedural hassles if we come forward to help an injured person on the road. This happened in our case in Save Life Foundation versus Union of India. And following that, the Government of India in 2019 incorporated the Good Samaritan law, into the Motor Vehicle Amendment Act, as a section of the law. So as on date, people, if they come forward to help an injured person, are insulated from most and pretty much all legal hassles. The challenge is, as we were also talking earlier, is that many people are not aware that they have this new right, that they can come forward to help without any fear or without any hesitation. What we need to do now that the confidence building measure has been taken place, has been taken into account, is to actually train people what to do. Because we still can't have a situation where people are being pulled out from cars.
That's right.
Like a sack of grains, and without management of the spine, without actually management of injuries, being moved into a vehicle, because that could even exacerbate injuries that have already taken place.
So how do you train people for that? That's a very important point you made, because anywhere else in the world, people have been told not to start picking people up, even if they are lying prone on the ground and look okay, because he may have a neck injury or a spine injury,
Absolutely.
and that could cause further damage, as you rightly said. So do you think the training for this also needs to be somehow incorporated with a first aid for, let's say, a first aid training at the license level?
Yeah, at the license level, at schooling level, at colleges, I think they should be everywhere because, we are a country that is prone to injuries. So training people in basic trauma life support, BTLS, is absolutely critical. And these are just 3 areas where we need to train people. How to control bleeding, how to immobilize the C-spine, so when you're lifting somebody, they are stable, and how to give CPR. If somebody has lost pulse, then how do you actually reactivate that? And there's a very simple protocol called check, call, care, which is you check for scene safety, check for the victim, call for help first, because eventually decisive care can be provided only in the hospital, and then provide primary care or initial care that you have been trained to provide. At the very least, call for help, because in most cases, when I lost a young child in our family, because of which I started Save Life, the challenge was that nobody even called for help, because there was this profound fear that the other side will ask for our details and then we'll be called to the court for another 20 years. So at least call for help if you are not confident of touching the victim or if blood is a problem for you. But at least call for help, and if you are trained, then definitely come forward to help. And if you face any issues, please know that if anybody troubles you, then it's contempt of court, and it's also contempt of the law that now exists off the land.
Amitabh, in your experience, you must have probably seen some accidents in your 200,000 kilometers that you've covered. What has the feeling been in your mind? Is it enough that is being done for accident victims? Is it right? Or as he rightly said, of course, training is very important as to how you deal with somebody who's injured. But beyond that, what else do you think needs to be done?
I think this is mainly an awareness issue, first of all.
It's also an infrastructure issue. You should have hospitals close by. You should have ambulances.
Yes.
They should be able to reach in time.
Yes.
So there's a multiple
factors, of
Factors,
course.
yes.
But it starts at awareness, and then India is a large country, and clearly we are not there yet in terms of the paramedics, the infrastructure support. So what I meant with awareness was that when you are planning a trip as an individual, you should plan a trip in such a way that you're aware of where are the major emergency access points or phone call points available. Some are being built on expressways now, which is a great thing, but more needs to be done in this area. So I would say that raise the awareness, improve the infrastructure levels. Yes, these are the things which can be done to address the issue.
Vimla, do you think enough is being done on the response time that the emergency services take? I know in cities it's quite good, it's not so bad. But on a highway, we don't know how long it'll take on some highways, on some not very major roads. And how do you actually move people? And the second issue, again, when it comes to the Good Samaritan, is that, well, Piyush has mentioned the law, but at the ground level, when the policeman comes and he wants your name and address and everything and wants to make you a witness in the case, that is a practical problem where you may be out of town and then you'll have to keep going back to the police station or to the local court. Is there still a problem there?
I think lack of awareness, and people still feel that if they get involved with a road accident, they will have problems later.
But will they? Or no?
I don't think so. No.
Okay.
Now that the law is there, anybody who helps a accident victim or somebody who has had trouble or accident on the roads, if he or she helps the person taken to hospital, he just has to hand over the person to the hospital people and no questions will be asked. He won't be asked to come to the court. Police will not ask them any questions. In fact, in case he has spent some money on transportation of the person, even that should be reimbursed. So it goes to that level, but people generally are not aware. And I think a lot needs to be done on this to educate people, to spread this message that helping an accident victim does not involve any trouble for you. So be a good person and have your responsibility. And it's a good thing to help people and saving somebody's life. And I think timely action and help and assistance will go a long way in saving many, many lives.
Well, I don't usually give my view because you are my guests and I want your view. But I would like to state here that if taking on a little hardship can save somebody's life, I think it's well worth it.
I think so. I agree with you.
So I would say that even if you have to go through a bit of a problem with going to courts or going anywhere else, the point is if you've saved somebody's life, it's really well worth it.
Yes.
So never spare the opportunity to help somebody.
Yes.
I think there is another area which is very closely linked with this, and that is not just the roads and the potholes, but the whole maintenance of our system. So traffic lights, warning lights, the emergency telephones, the first aid kits and all that. And I think that's where there are multiple agencies that get involved. And maybe there is room there to either have a nodal agency that can coordinate everything, or have separate agencies that can then look at, let's say, the maintenance of this and be responsible for it. How do you see it, Amitabh?
Well, this is more in the patch of managing an urban infrastructure. So you have the concept of central control rooms. We do have some in Delhi as well. In fact, I've visited a couple of them, which are equipped with the CCTV feeds from everywhere, the phone lines, and everything comes together. That's the way. That's the only way to do it. That's the way it's being done in the West. We are still a bit behind when it comes to having a nodal agency in place. Like a legal entity. It's still not there, but that's the right way to do it. In the meanwhile, in the interim, of course, public, members of the common society can also do a little bit. We have a concept of crowdsourced apps, which can list, emergency contact numbers, hospitals, and things like that. So I would appeal to anyone who can to put together sort of like a crowdsourced nodal agency of sorts. That's the interim step before we get there.
But the one thing I would like to end on is that traveling by road is really a lot of fun. And at the end of the day, yes, there are risks, but I spent a lot of my younger days traveling with my parents and learned a lot about the country by going right across the country by road. I think, Amitabh, you are one person who's been doing it and continue to, I think, spread the word of the joys of road travel. But I wanted to check with you, Vimla, how do you see it? Do you think that joy is still very much there in road travel? And do you think that people should venture more out for fun? I just don't mean for work, but also perhaps as tourists to travel by road and soak in the countryside.
Yeah, countryside is so beautiful. You go and you find greenery all around. If you are going through the mountainous area, you see the mountains. In any case, to know your country better, there is no other way to understand your countryside and meet people. And you learn so much. When you go to a village, you learn so much, things which you have not seen and imagine that your country is like this also. People are beautiful, people are very forthcoming, they love their guests, whosoever comes. So you just have to venture out, and I am sure if people drive carefully and they are sensible enough to go where and what time they are going. If it is daytime, perhaps if you avoid darker areas, it would be better. So if you take certain precautions, it's a very good thing to go around and enjoy and see the countryside and know your country better. There's no other way better than like driving on the roads.
So if I may summarize, it's important to teach at schools, not just the road usage, but also first aid and etiquette, and then also carry this forward into licensing, try and see how we can become better human beings by helping others in distress on the road, and also trying to find the right balance of enjoying the road and making sure that everybody else enjoys it too. So with that, I thank you all for coming in today. Thank you, Piyush. Thank you, Amitabh. Thank you, Vimla.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you for tuning in.
In our national program of talks tonight, you just heard a panel discussion entitled Of Rage, Death and Apathy, Our Roads. The panelists were Vimla Mehra, IPS, former Special Commissioner, Delhi Police, Piyush Tiwari, CEO, Save Life Foundation, Amitabh Pandey, intrepid traveller and member, India's largest biking forum, and Vikram Behel, media personality, who initiated and moderated the discussion. Produced and presented by Naveen K. Gupta, this program came to you from the Delhi station of All India Radio.